For 4 years, I lived in the United States, working myself to exhaustion to build a better future for my wife, Kavya, and me. I sacrificed everything: comfort, health, closeness with the people I loved, believing that effort would strengthen our marriage. But the distance slowly opened a gap between us that I never noticed growing. When I was unexpectedly deported, I came home without telling anyone, ashamed of my failure, hoping to surprise Kavya and start rebuilding our life together. But the moment I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. She was nervous, distant, unable to look me in the eye. And then I discovered the impossible. She was pregnant, 7 months along, a timeline that made it absolutely impossible for the child to be mine. The truth became even more devastating when my best friend since childhood, Aditya, walked into the house with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. He was the father of the baby. The man I had trusted to look after my wife while I was away had become her lover. Shattered, I went to my parents' house, where I finally broke down and told them everything. In the days that followed, I tried to understand how this had happened. I spoke with Aditya, who explained that Kavya's loneliness had grown slowly, fueled by my absence and by the lack of real presence. Even when I was on the phone with her, he admitted that instead of protecting her as he had promised, he let his feelings for her grow. Later, I spoke with Kavya, who told me, without excuses, how she had felt emotionally abandoned long before any betrayal happened, as if the man she loved had been replaced by someone consumed only by work and sending money home. Faced with all of this, I chose not to let anger or revenge consume me. I separated from Kavya peacefully, without fighting, without trying to destroy either of their lives. Aditya took responsibility for the daughter who would be born, and over time, we reached a kind of mutual respect, even though our friendship would never be the same. With what little savings I had left, and some help from my parents, I opened a small electronics repair shop in my hometown. It wasn't the grand success I had dreamed of when I boarded that plane to America, but it was mine, built with my own hands, surrounded by people who truly knew me. I lost my marriage, my best friend, and 4 years of my life chasing a dream that fell apart. But within all of that loss, I found a chance to rebuild my life on something real, and for the first time in a long time, I feel peace when I look toward the future. 4 years. 4 years of my life, gone in a single afternoon, packed into 2 suitcases and a folder of documents that no longer mattered. I remember sitting on that plane, staring out the window at clouds that looked like cotton, thinking about how I used to dream of this exact moment, going home. But this wasn't the homecoming I had imagined. This wasn't victory. This was defeat, wrapped in a deportation order and stamped with my name. For 4 years, I had worked jobs that broke my body before they broke my spirit, driving through snowstorms at 3 in the morning, stacking boxes in warehouses until my hands went numb, sleeping 4 hours a night just to send money home. Every dollar I earned, I told myself, was a brick in the house we would build together. Every sacrifice was for her, for my wife, for the life we promised each other before I left. Her name was Kavya. We had been married for 6 years before I left for the United States, and in the beginning, the distance didn't feel so heavy. We talked every single day. She would tell me about her day at work, about the neighbors, about the small things, a leaking tap, a power cut, a movie she watched alone because she missed me too much to watch it with friends. I would tell her about the cold, about the loneliness of an empty apartment, about how every plate of food reminded me of her cooking. But slowly, almost without me noticing, things began to change. The calls became shorter. The messages became fewer. Where she used to ask, "When are you coming home?" with excitement in her voice, she started asking it with something that sounded more like exhaustion. I told myself it was just stress. I told myself marriages survive distance all the time. I told myself a lot of things, because the alternative, admitting that something was breaking, was too painful to face from thousands of miles away. There was one person, though, who I trusted completely during all of this. My best friend since we were teenagers. We grew up on the same street, went to the same school, shared the same dreams of one day making something of ourselves. When I left for the US, he was the one I called and said, "Please, look after Kavya. Make sure she's okay. Make sure she's not alone." And he promised me he would. He said, "Don't worry, brother. She's like my sister. I'll take care of everything." I believed him with my whole heart, because in 25 years of friendship, he had never once given me a reason not to. That trust was the only thing that gave me peace at night. lying in a cramped room I shared with 3 other men, all of us far from home, all of us chasing the same impossible dream, knowing that my wife had someone to call if her car broke down, someone to help if the electricity went out, someone who would check on her when I couldn't. That knowledge let me sleep. It let me work harder. It let me believe that even if our marriage was struggling, at least she was safe. Then came the day everything fell apart. Not slowly this time, but all at once. I had gone to renew some paperwork, something I had done a dozen times before without issue. But this time, there was a problem. A technicality, they called it. An error in the system from years ago that had never been corrected. Before I even understood what was happening, I was being processed for deportation. No warning. No time to say goodbye to the friends I had made, the small life I had built in that foreign country. Just papers, signatures, and a flight booked for 2 days later. I called Kavya that night, my hands shaking as I dialed. I wanted to tell her everything, that I was coming home, that I had failed, that the dream we had built our marriage around was over. But when she picked up, something in her voice made me stop. She sounded distant, distracted. When I told her I was being sent back, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Okay," just that one word, before quickly changing the subject and ending the call faster than usual. I told myself it was the shock. I told myself she just needed time to process it. But deep down, something inside me had already started to feel uneasy, like a small crack forming in glass. The kind you don't notice until the whole thing shatters. I decided not to tell anyone else that I was coming back. Not my parents, not my friends, and especially not Kavya. Not the exact date anyway. Part of it was shame. I didn't want anyone to see me arrive empty-handed, without the success I had promised. But another part of it, a part I didn't want to admit even to myself, was that I wanted to see her reaction with my own eyes. I wanted to see, in that unguarded moment when she opened the door and saw me standing there, whether she was truly happy or whether there was something else hiding behind her eyes. The flight back felt endless. Every hour that passed, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would explain everything, how I would hold her and tell her that even though I came back with nothing, at least we still had each other. I imagined her crying with relief, hugging me, telling me it didn't matter that I had failed, that all that mattered was that I was home. When the plane finally landed, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I took a taxi straight from the airport to our home, my heart pounding harder with every familiar street we passed. The bakery on the corner, the temple where we used to pray together before I left, the small park where we had our first date all those years ago. Everything looked the same, and yet everything felt different, like I was looking at my old life through glass, unable to touch it. When the taxi finally stopped in front of our house, I sat there for a moment, just staring at the door. 4 years of dreaming about this moment, and now that it was here, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my bag. I walked up to the door, took a deep breath, and used my old key, the one I had carried with me across the world, the one I had touched 1,000 times during sleepless nights, imagining this exact moment. The lock clicked open, and the moment I stepped inside, before I even saw her face, I knew, somehow I already knew, that the life I was walking back into was not the one I had left behind. The house was quiet, too quiet. I stood in the doorway for a moment, my suitcase still in my hand, listening. After 4 years of dreaming about this exact entrance, I had imagined sounds, the television playing softly, the smell of spices from the kitchen, maybe even Kavya's voice humming a song while she cooked, the way she used to. Instead, there was nothing, just silence, and a strange, heavy stillness that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Kavya?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the hallway. For a moment, there was no response. Then I heard footsteps, quick, almost panicked, coming from the bedroom, and then she appeared in the doorway, and the first thing I noticed wasn't her face. It was the way she froze, completely froze, like someone who had just seen a ghost. "Neil?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're here." I dropped my bag and took a step toward her, my arms already opening for the hug I had imagined 1,000 times on that plane. "Surprise," I said, trying to smile, even though something about her expression was making my stomach twist. "I know I should have called, but I wanted to surprise you. Why didn't you call?" she interrupted, and there was something sharp in her voice, something that sounded less like joy and more like fear. "Why would you just show up like this? I stood there, my arms still half raised, feeling foolish. This wasn't the reaction I had pictured. Not even close. I wanted to see you, I said slowly. I missed you. 4 years, Kavya. I just wanted to come home and hold you. She seemed to catch herself then, and forced something that was supposed to be a smile but looked more like a grimace. She stepped forward and gave me a quick, stiff hug. The kind you give a distant relative, not the kind you give a husband you haven't seen in years. I held on to her for a moment longer than she allowed, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that she was just in shock, that of course this was overwhelming for her. But when she pulled away, I noticed something I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. She was wearing a loose kurta, something I had never seen her wear before, long, flowing fabric that hung past her waist, and underneath it, even with the loose fit, I could see the unmistakable curve of her stomach. For a moment, I genuinely thought I was imagining it. I told myself it was just the lighting, or the way the fabric fell, or maybe she had simply gained some weight while I was away, which, after everything she must have gone through emotionally during my absence, wouldn't have been surprising at all. I tried to push the thought away, tried to focus on the moment, on being home, on the woman standing in front of me who I had missed every single day for 4 years. You look different, I said carefully, forcing a smile. Have you been eating well? You look healthy. Her face went pale, completely pale, and in that moment, I knew. I didn't want to know, but I knew. Neil, she said, her voice trembling now. We need to talk. Please, sit down. Kavya, are you… My voice cracked. I couldn't even finish the sentence. The words felt too big, too dangerous to say out loud, as if saying them would make them real. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked past me, into the living room, and sat down heavily on the sofa, placing both hands over her stomach in a gesture that confirmed everything I was too afraid to ask. I stood frozen in the hallway, my whole body numb. The suitcase I had carried across continents, through airports, through immigration offices, through a deportation process that had stripped away my dignity. It suddenly felt like the lightest thing in the world compared to the weight that was settling onto my chest right now. How far along? I finally managed to ask, my voice barely recognizable to my own ears. She looked down at her hands. 7 months. 7 months. I did the math instantly, automatically, the way you do when your brain refuses to accept what your heart already knows. 7 months. I had been gone for 4 years. The last time I had been physically in this house, physically with her, was 4 years ago. There was no possible way, none, that this child could be mine. Kavya, I said slowly, each word feeling like it was being dragged out of me. Whose baby is this? She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at her hands, tears beginning to fall silently down her face. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my life. Kavya, I said again, louder this time, my voice cracking with something between desperation and rage. Please, look at me. Whose baby is this? It's complicated, she whispered. Complicated? I repeated, feeling something inside me start to break apart. I have been gone for 4 years, Kavya. 4 years of working myself to exhaustion, sending you every rupee I could spare, calling you every single day that I could, all so we could have a life together. And now I come home. I come home after being deported, after losing everything I worked for, and you're telling me you're pregnant, and the only thing you can say is that it's complicated. She finally looked up at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't just guilt. It was something deeper, something that looked almost like grief, the kind of grief you feel when you've already mourned something for a long time before anyone else even knows it's gone. Neil, she said softly, her voice shaking, I was so alone. You don't understand what these years were like for me. I tried to tell you. I tried so many times, but you were always so far away, always so tired, always so focused on work. And then what? I demanded, my voice rising despite myself. Who, Kavya? Who is the father? She opened her mouth, but before she could say a single word, I heard a sound behind me, the front door, which I had left unlocked, creaking open, and then a voice I knew better than almost any voice in the world called out from the hallway, warm and familiar, completely unaware of what he was walking into. Kavya, it's me. I brought the things you asked for. I turned around slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. standing in the doorway of my own home, holding a bag of groceries with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there, was my best friend. The bag of groceries slipped from his hand the moment our eyes met. I watched it happen in slow motion, the way his face went from warm and relaxed to something that looked like the floor had opened up beneath him. The plastic bag hit the ground, and I heard the soft thud of vegetables and packets spilling out across the tiles. But neither of us moved. We just stood there, staring at each other. Two men who had known each other since we were 13 years old, both frozen in a silence that felt like it lasted forever. "Neil," he finally said, his voice barely audible. When did you?" "Today," I said, my voice strangely calm, almost detached, as if I were watching this entire scene happen to someone else. "I got back today." He didn't say anything else. He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, his eyes darting between me and Kavya, who had gone completely silent on the sofa, her hands still wrapped protectively around her stomach. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 25 years of friendship, I felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. This was the boy I had shared a desk with in school, the teenager I had stayed up with, talking about our futures, our dreams, the girls we liked, the man who stood beside me at my wedding, who held my hand and told me I was the luckiest man alive to have found someone like Kavya. The same man I had called from a freezing parking lot in America, my voice breaking with loneliness, asking him, begging him, to look after my wife while I was gone. And now here he was, walking into my house with groceries, with the kind of comfort and familiarity that only comes from months, maybe years, of being somewhere so often, it stops feeling like visiting and starts feeling like home. "Aditya," I said slowly, his name feeling strange in my mouth. "Is this baby yours?" The silence that followed was its own kind of answer, but I needed to hear it. I needed the words. "Neil, please," he said, taking a step toward me, his hands raised slightly like someone trying to calm a wild animal. "Let me explain. It's not what you—" "Is the baby yours?" I shouted, and the sound of my own voice surprised even me. Raw, broken, filled with 4 years of exhaustion and heartbreak finally cracking open all at once. He flinched. And then, after a long, agonizing pause, he nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "Yes, it's mine." I don't remember exactly what happened in the next few seconds. I remember my legs feeling weak, like they might give out beneath me. I remember reaching out to steady myself against the wall, my hand pressing against the same wall I had painted with Kavya before I left. A pale yellow color she had chosen because she said it made the house feel like sunshine. "How long?" I asked, my voice now barely a whisper. "How long has this been going on?" Neither of them answered immediately. I looked at Kavya, who was crying silently, her shoulders shaking, and then at Aditya, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "About a year," Kavya finally said, her voice trembling, maybe a little more. "A year, more than a year. While I was on the other side of the world, working 16-hour shifts, eating cold food in my car between jobs just to save a few extra dollars to send home, my wife and my best friend had been." I couldn't even finish the thought. Every memory of the past year flooded back to me at once. Every phone call, every conversation, every time Kavya had sounded distant or distracted, every time Aditya had reassured me that everything was fine, that he was just helping out, that I had nothing to worry about. "You told me she was like a sister to you," I said, turning to Aditya, my voice shaking with a fury I had never felt before in my life. "You promised me. You looked me in the eyes. Well, not in person, but you know what I mean. You promised me you would take care of her, protect her. And this is what that meant? This? Neil, I never meant for this to happen," he said, his own voice cracking now. "I swear to you, I never planned any of this. It happened. We were both so lonely, and lonely," I repeated, the word tasting like poison in my mouth. "I was lonely too, Aditya. I was alone in a country where I didn't know anyone, working jobs that broke my back, sleeping on a mattress on the floor because I couldn't afford a bed, all so that I could send money home to build a life for us, for me and her. And the entire time, you were here, living my life, sleeping in my house, with my wife." "It's not like that," Kavya said suddenly, standing up from the sofa, her hands still resting on her belly. "Neil, please, you have to understand. Things between us had been falling apart long before any of this happened. You were never here. Even when we talked, it felt like talking to a stranger. You were so consumed by work, by money, by trying to prove something. I felt like I had lost my husband long before Aditya and I ever. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I stood there, my chest heaving, trying to process everything, the betrayal, the timeline, the years of loneliness on both sides that had somehow led to this moment. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to walk out that door and never come back. And part of me, the smallest, most exhausted part, wanted to understand. Because as angry as I was, as broken as I felt, I could see now that this wasn't something that had happened overnight. This was something that had been growing for a long time, in the spaces between us that I had let grow too wide. I need to leave, I said finally, my voice flat, empty. I can't be here right now. Neil, wait, Aditya started, reaching out toward me. Don't, I said, stepping back from him as if his touch might burn me. Don't you dare touch me. You don't get to comfort me. Not after this. I picked up my suitcase, the same suitcase I had carried halfway across the world, dreaming of the moment I would walk through that door and be home. And now, less than 30 minutes after walking through it, I was walking back out. Except this time, I had nowhere to go. As I stepped outside, the evening air hit my face, cool and sharp, and for the first time since landing, I let myself cry. Not the quiet tears I'd been holding back since the airport, but deep, broken sobs that came from somewhere I didn't even know existed inside me. Behind me, through the open door, I could hear Kavya crying too, and Aditya saying something I couldn't make out, but I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, suitcase in hand, into a night that felt colder and lonelier than any night I had spent in America, because at least there, I had believed I had something to come home to. Now, I had nothing. Not a home, not a wife, not a best friend. Just me, a suitcase, and a future I had no idea how to face. I don't know how long I walked that night. The streets I had once known so well now felt foreign to me, as if 4 years away had erased not just my place in this town, but my place in the world. I walked past the same houses, the same shops, the same corners where I used to stop and buy chai on my way to work before everything changed. Everything looked exactly the same, and yet nothing felt the same at all. Eventually, my legs simply gave out, and I found myself sitting on a bench near the small park where Kavya and I had our first date all those years ago. I sat there for what felt like hours, my suitcase beside me, staring at nothing, replaying everything that had just happened over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of something that refused to make sense. At some point, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look at it. Part of me wanted to throw the phone into the bushes and disappear, to pretend none of this had happened, to go back to a version of my life where I still believed I had something waiting for me at home. But old habits are hard to break, and I looked. It was a message from my mother. Beta, are you home yet? I haven't heard from you. Call me when you can. I stared at those words for a long time. My parents didn't know I had been deported. I hadn't told them yet, partly because of shame, and partly because I had wanted to figure things out with Kavya first before bringing anyone else into it. But now, sitting on that bench with nowhere to go and no one to turn to, I realized I didn't have a choice anymore. I called her. Beta? She answered immediately, her voice warm and worried, the way mothers' voices always are. Where are you? Is everything okay? And that was it. That was the moment everything I had been holding inside since stepping off that plane finally broke free. I told her everything. The deportation, coming home early, walking into the house, finding Kavya pregnant, Aditya walking in with the groceries. I told her all of it, my voice shaking, my words tumbling out faster than I could control them, while tears streamed down my face in the darkness of that empty park. There was a long silence on the other end of the line after I finished, and then my mother said something I will never forget. Come home, Beta. Just come home. We'll figure everything out together. I took a taxi to my parents' house that night, the house I had grown up in, the house I hadn't set foot in for 4 years because every time I had planned to visit, work had gotten in the way, or money had been too tight, or there simply hadn't been enough time. When I walked through that door, my mother was waiting for me, and the moment she saw my face, she didn't ask any more questions. She just pulled me into her arms and held me the way she used to when I was a child, and I let myself cry again, this time without trying to stop it. My father, a quiet man who rarely showed much emotion, sat with me at the kitchen table that night while my mother made tea, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw real anger in his eyes. Not at me, but on my behalf. Aditya, he said slowly, shaking his head. I never would have imagined. That boy practically grew up in this house. I trusted him, I said quietly. I trusted both of them. My father was silent for a moment before he spoke again. Neil, I'm not going to pretend I understand everything that happened, but I think you need to find out the full story before you decide what to do next. Not because it changes what they did, but because you deserve to understand it, for your own peace, if nothing else. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything my father had said. Part of me wanted to hate them both completely, to walk away and never look back. But another part of me, the part that had loved Kavya for over a decade, the part that had considered Aditya a brother, needed to understand how something like this had happened. Not to forgive it, but to understand it. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Aditya. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the screen for what felt like an eternity. But eventually, something, curiosity, anger, the need for closure, maybe all of it at once, made me press the green button. Neil, he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't slept either. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but please, just 5 minutes. I agreed to meet him, against my better judgment, at a small tea stall near the old cricket ground where we used to play together as kids. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting alone at a plastic table, looking like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. Thank you for coming, he said quietly as I sat down across from him. I'm not here for an apology, I said flatly. I'm here because I need to understand. That's it. He nodded slowly, then took a deep breath. After you left, the first year wasn't bad. Kavya seemed okay. We would talk sometimes. You'd ask me to check on her, so I did. Coffee, helping with errands, that kind of thing. Nothing more than that. And then, I asked? And then things started to change, he continued. She started telling me things she never told you. How lonely she felt. How she'd cry herself to sleep some nights. How she felt like she had married a ghost because you were always working, always tired, always somewhere else even when you were on the phone with her. I tried to encourage her to talk to you about it. I really did, Neil. But every time she tried, you'd brush it off. Tell her you were doing this for her, that she just needed to be patient. I felt my jaw tighten, because as much as I wanted to deny it, I remembered those conversations. I remembered telling her to be patient. I remembered being too exhausted, too focused on survival, to really listen to what she was trying to tell me. That doesn't excuse what you did, I said. I know, he said immediately. I know it doesn't. There's no excuse. I started feeling things I shouldn't have felt. And instead of stopping it, instead of being the friend you trusted me to be, I let it happen. We both did. And I am sorrier than you will ever know. I sat there, staring at the steam rising from my untouched cup of tea, feeling a strange mixture of anger, grief, and something I hadn't expected to feel at all. A small, painful flicker of understanding. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But understanding. What happens now? Aditya asked quietly. With the baby. With Kavya. With everything. I looked up at him, and for the first time since landing back in this country, I realized that the hardest decision of my entire life wasn't behind me. It was still ahead. I sat across from Aditya at that tea stall for a long time after he asked his question, neither of us speaking. The steam from our cups had long disappeared, and the morning sun was beginning to climb higher in the sky. But I felt frozen in that moment, caught between two versions of myself, the man who wanted to burn everything down, and the man who was simply too tired to fight anymore. I don't know yet, I finally said, but I know one thing. Whatever happens, I'm not going to let this destroy me. Over the next few days, I stayed at my parents' house, trying to find some kind of footing in a life that felt completely unfamiliar to me now. My mother fed me like she used to when I was a child, as if good food could somehow heal a broken heart. My father, in his quiet way, simply sat with me in the evenings, not always talking, just letting me know he was there. During that time, I went back and forth on so many emotions. Some moments, I felt rage so intense I could barely breathe. Rage at Kavya for breaking the promises we made to each other. Rage at Aditya for betraying 25 years of friendship. And even rage at myself for being so absorbed in survival that I had stopped truly seeing the person I loved. But other moments, I felt something different. I felt grief, not just for my marriage, but for the version of my life I had spent 4 years building in my mind, the homecoming I had imagined. The family I thought I would return to. All of it was gone, and no amount of anger could bring it back. About a week after that conversation at the tea stall, Kavya reached out to me. She asked if we could talk, really talk, without anyone else around. I agreed, mostly because I knew that no matter how this ended, I needed closure, not just for her sake or Aditya's, but for my own. We met at our old house, the house I hadn't been able to step foot in since that first day. Walking through that door again felt strange, like visiting a place from another lifetime. Kavya looked tired in a way that went deeper than just the pregnancy. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she made tea for us, the same way she used to make it for me every morning before I left for America. "I owe you the truth," she said, sitting down across from me. "All of it. Not excuses. Just the truth." And so she told me everything, about the loneliness that had crept into her life slowly, like water filling a room one drop at a time until suddenly she was drowning and hadn't even noticed. About the nights she would sit alone, scrolling through old photos of us, wondering if the man in those pictures even existed anymore, or if he had been replaced entirely by someone who only cared about money and work. About how Aditya had simply been there, present, listening, in a way that, over time, I hadn't been. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," she said, her voice breaking. "What Aditya and I did was wrong. There's no version of this where it wasn't wrong. But Neil, I need you to understand. By the time it happened, I had already lost you. Not because you stopped loving me, but because the distance had become too much for both of us to survive." I sat there listening to her, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of clarity. For 4 years, I had told myself that working abroad was the ultimate sacrifice for our marriage, the thing that would prove my love and devotion. But somewhere along the way, that sacrifice had become a wall between us, brick by brick, until neither of us even realized how far apart we had drifted. "What do you want to do now?" I asked her quietly. "About the baby. About us." She looked down at her hands, resting on her belly. I think we both know that going back to how things were isn't possible. Not after everything. But Neil, this baby didn't ask to be born into any of this. And whatever happens between us, I hope you can find peace. Real peace. Not just for me, but for yourself too." In the weeks that followed, I made some of the hardest decisions of my life. Kavya and I agreed to separate, peacefully and without bitterness, as much as that was possible given everything. I didn't fight her on anything. I didn't try to punish her or Aditya, or make their lives harder than they already were. Some people in my life couldn't understand that decision. They told me I should be angrier, that I should demand more, that I deserved to make them suffer for what they had done. But I had already suffered enough, and more importantly, I had realized something important during those long nights at my parents' house. Holding on to anger and seeking revenge wouldn't give me back the 4 years I had lost, or the marriage that had quietly died long before I even knew it was sick. All it would do was poison whatever years I had left. Aditya and I never went back to being the friends we once were. Some things, once broken, simply cannot be repaired the way they were. But surprisingly, we did eventually reach a kind of peace. Not friendship, but something close to mutual respect. He took responsibility, financially and emotionally, for the child that was coming. And in a strange twist of fate, I found myself, months later, sending him a short message wishing him well when I heard the baby, a healthy baby girl, had been born safely. As for me, I used the small amount of savings I had left, along with some help from my parents, to start over completely. I opened a small shop in town. Nothing extraordinary, just a modest electronics repair business. The kind of work I had always been good at, but never had the chance to pursue because I was always chasing bigger dreams in bigger places. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the success story I had imagined when I boarded that plane to America 4 years earlier. But it was mine, built with my own 2 hands, in my own country, surrounded by people who actually knew me. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about everything that happened, the years apart, the betrayal, the anger, the grief. But I've also come to understand something I wish I had known years ago. Love isn't just about sacrifice from a distance. It's about presence. It's about being there, really there, for the people you love, even when life gets hard, even when it would be easier to disappear into work and call it devotion. I lost my marriage. I lost my best friend. I lost 4 years of my life to a dream that ultimately fell apart. But somewhere in the wreckage of everything I lost, I found something I didn't expect. A chance to rebuild myself. Slower this time, but on a foundation that was actually real. And for the first time in a long time, when I look toward the future, I don't feel fear. I feel peace.